So, hi everyone. My name's Daniel Thorpe. I've been working at Spotler Group for, I don't know, 18, 19 years now, something quite crazy like that. I've always been in deliverability world. Absolute sucker for it. It's a real geeky subject. I love it, and it's also annoying. But I'm now the head of deliverability for the entire Spotler Group, which means I'm responsible for not just one ESP that I originally started with, but all of them in the group, and of which there's 7 of us at the moment. 7 different products, that is. GatorMail, Pure 360, MeasureMail Tripolis, Web Power, and Mail Plus. Oh, and FlowMailer, sorry, that's the 7th. So yeah, I do this stuff all the time with a team, looking at deliverability things, trying to keep it all going and flowing forward. But today you're here to just listen about how you can be better at your own deliverability. So yeah, most of this is pretty much a important but also quite boring subject, I imagine. There's a lot of reading out to you. So yeah, enjoy it. But yeah, email deliverability measures how successful the placement of your marketing emails are in your recipient's inbox. Maintaining good deliverability would mean all of your mail is sent and delivered. Bad would be the opposite of spam filtered into junk folder or something like that, or just being rejected completely. So the key factors that affect your email deliverability are your email reputation. So that's where ESPs determine whether to deliver your emails based on your email sending behavior and reputation. A low sort of reputation score or spam history can lead you to spam. It's email authentication. This lets ESPs process and verify the sender's identity and help them prevent spam, because obviously providers out there, they don't want spam at all. So authenticating email using the standard set, which I'll come back to, is obviously great. Email content's big as well. Deliverability can also be affected by the content in the mail. So emails may be marked as spam if you use spam trigger words or phrases. You should provide valuable content to your recipient. The bounce rates. So high bounce rate in an email is unhealthy. It can create a suspicion that you're opting for spam activities if your bounce rate's too high. Complaint rate as well, that's a metric ISPs can monitor. If you're getting too many complaints, they can use that against you, because if enough people complain, they might just be like, well, that's our threshold triggered, so if that many people complained, it must be a bad thing. Engagement rate can also be measured. So if they don't see good engagement from the email and they see negative engagement, they can then make a judgment call on your reputation and your send as a whole thing. And sending pattern is incredibly important as well. So ESPs can track the volume and frequency of your mail, and your deliverability could be negatively affected if you send larger volumes at once. So if you do spike sending, and I'll come back to that sort of thing later as well. Oops. So is your email deliverability good or poor? These are the metrics that kind of do that, and you should look at as well. So what is your delivery rate? It measures the proportion of email delivered to recipient inboxes. It's a good indicator of deliverability. If your deliverability rate is consistently high, that's a good sign that everything's going okay. Open rate, higher open rate, the better, of course. Bounce rate, the higher the bounce rate, the worse things are, of course. And again, for complaints, and again, for engagement. But it's for these things, it's the take for this, although it's pretty similar to the last slide, is you need to watch these things and monitor them on a campaign by campaign basis, on a day by day, week by week, month by month. Keep on them, and you're looking for spikes basically, or drops. Is anything like that? If you see something like that, you need to investigate. Obviously, especially if it's a drop, because that means something's gone wrong. It could just be a new list, or something in the content was changed, or something like that. Try and identify these things in your data. Just keep on top of it. Watch it like a hawk. Email deliverability is all about the sending domain. So the from address of your campaign is the email address the recipient sees in their inbox when they receive your mail. It should look like it's from you, from your business. So because of that, you should use your business domain for the email. So sending from your companyname.com, or a subdomain off of it, such as marketingyourcompanydomain.com. Your recipients will see your brand because you've used your domain. There's no mention of an ESP in the from address, because by default on a new account, with an ESP, typically they might let you send anyway, and it could come out of a domain that is from the ESP. Now you shouldn't really use that. That's just kind of like an account default. It's much better to have your own domain mentioned. Excuse me. So make sure your from address is fully branded, and it will help increase everything about your deliverability. Also, using a branded domain helps protect your company transactional and business emails from being affected by blacklists, such as Spamhaus. Because everyone out there, basically, they like to see your domain. They don't want to see a different domain. Another reason for that is there's an organization called MORG, stands for Messaging, Malware, and Mobile Anti-Abuse Working Group. Bit of a mouthful, but what they do is they meet multiple times a year. I've been to a few myself. They create policy standards. It's attended by ESPs like us, users like yourselves, ISPs, providers, and more. So Google, Microsoft, and all that kind of stuff. And it's a collection of people that basically create policy documents. And they released one a few years ago now, which was called the Sending Domain Best Practice. They do loads of these. Morg, you can go and Google Morg and read some of their stuff if you're ultra geeky into it. But they have a guide. They wrote a guide basically of what your sending domain, what everybody agrees should be your sending domain for sending emails. So this is like providers are saying this. The people you're trying to get your emails delivered to basically are saying this, and they've declared that it should be your business domain. It shouldn't be a cousin domain. So yeah, when you have a domain, there's a couple of options. Usually it's your business domain, or sometimes it can be a brand new domain related to the brand. If you don't use your actual business domain, it's called a cousin domain, and that's where the email domain is just obviously not the same as your business. A cousin domain can typically look like it's a phishing thing, and it can often increase complaints or emails being blocked and filtered. So because of that, Morg, quoted here, strongly discourage the use of a cousin domain. They all prefer everyone sends from your root business domain. Here's an example. Resource here is a replacement field. That's where the subject line would be. Dynamic content, I should say. But this is just a real simple example. If you notice on that screen, it's basically an email address at SpotlerUK, which is us, versus at SpotlerMail.co.uk. That's SpotlerMail.co.uk. Obviously you can see Spotler in there. It is linked. Sometimes though, it could be email-spotler.co.uk. It's just anything that isn't Spotler.co.uk. And instantly, although you might gloss over it and go, oh, I haven't never thought about this, or think it's fine, it isn't as good as your business domain. You're much better off having your business domain there, and I don't know at what point I might have personally decided to start checking these things out in my life. It could have well been after I got into deliverability, but everyone receives spam in their own email accounts, right? And I kind of feel like back in the day, I used to look at an email address and go, yeah, I don't want to click that. I'd look at the domain and go, yeah, I don't recognize that. And if it is the company domain, you're not going to make that opinion, are you? But if you're looking at it as it's like Spotler email co.uk, that could be someone else. That might not necessarily be the company. You might not know. So that's why it's better. Hope you agree. Sending authentication. Now, all of this is usually handled by your ESP when you set up your account. There's pretty much three main types. SPF, Sender Policy Framework. It's a simple email validation system that detects email spoofing. It allows the domain owner to specify which IP address is authorized to send mail on behalf of that domain. DKIM, pretty much the same thing. It's just another type. And DMARC. DMARC is one of the latest ones, although again a few years old now. DMARC, it's a policy that combines both SPF and DKIM to determine the authenticity of the message. So whenever you send an email, even if it's actually from your business domain, realistically, you should have these three authentications. So nothing to do with an ESP using anyone. If you just send from your own company outside to the internet, ideally you should have all these authentications. But it is even more important when you send email via a product, via an ESP, basically. ESPs won't let you send email without authentication. It's usually a setup once and done. You don't need to care about it again. But sometimes authentication can break just because people manage DNS and move, domains can expire and you might renew them and it might lose the records. So sometimes it is something to just keep on top of. Usually though, I mean, we do it and I do it personally. I can sometimes spot domains lost its records or something's just got a typo in it, and that's mid the customer's contract, months and months down the line, and we'll let you know on what to do to fix it. But these authentications help providers out there a bit to just go, oh, if someone's passed these three things, I know the email is at least okay on paper, basically. Whereas if they fail for any reason, they can use that, just go, nope, reject that message. We do not want it. There's another form of authentication I didn't put on the slides called BIMI. I don't know what it stands for now. That's the latest one. It's the one that you can authenticate your logo. So you can authenticate your logo that appears in the inbox for, say, Google. But it's quite costly, and that one though is all between effectively yourselves and the provider. So it's like the ESP, like we would have basically nothing to do with customers setting up a BIMI authentication. It's not like an authentication that the ESP can provide for you. This is why it's not on the slide, but this is an authentication that you have to do yourselves, and then you can add it into your ESP account. One very important thing with email deliverability is warm up and ramp up. Now, usually this is when you're starting to send. So people on this call probably at various stages. Most of you, I imagine, are already doing this. But it's also still important to maintain. So you should, at the beginning, warm up is about volume to start an account with, like a new domain or a new IP address, or you've joined an ESP. Ramp up is the warm up is basically where you send emails low and slow at the very, very beginning, and the ramp up is then you start accelerating to the point at which you've reached your peak email volume, and that process can take a few weeks to a month, but it's really, really important. So you need to basically stay consistent with your domains. Each domain has its own warm up, so it's best to have just one, but you can have multiple sending domains if you want to for any reason. You need to start low and slow, increase it slowly. You should always send to the truly hyper-engaged subscribers first, and you should avoid sending to cold data or purchase lists. Some ESPs don't let you at all send to purchase lists. You must have opt-in permission at a minimum. In the group, we've got one ESP that allows you to send to legitimate interest data, and everyone else is opted in data. Everyone frowns on legitimate interest data. It is legal to do it, but it is a lot harder to get successful deliverability when you haven't got opted in data, which should be common sense, to be honest with you, which is why most ESPs just don't allow you to do it at all. We're not the only one. One of ours in the group isn't the only ones that are out there that allow it, of course. There are several, but still we have flags and checks on any data to go. If there's something in there we don't like the look of, we've got to talk about it first, basically, before you're even allowed to do it. Also, you need to check the results within the product to identify and troubleshoot delivery issues. And this is just during the warm-up process, because it's very sensitive when you're beginning out. You've got to monitor the daily, you/your ESP, obviously us/hopefully us. We monitor that, make sure it looks okay, and if there's anything that looks concerning with the warm-up, we're on it. And usually it's a bit like slow down, what data you're using type of stuff. But yeah, you need to monitor delivery and open rates by mailbox provider, because warm-up is also separate per provider out there. So Google's warm-up will be different from Outlook's warm-up or Yahoo's or whatever. And you can also sign up for, because Google basically, there's a lot of focus on Google in a way, because Google's one of the most popular providers out there, of course. So there is a Google Postmaster Tools, if you haven't heard of it, that you should sign up for, and we can. It's basically a system where you can add your domain into it, and they can just give you their own reporting on your domain based on the delivery of your emails into Google. So it's a great reporting tool, and you can have your own account, and we can have your domain as well and monitor it ourselves. I've got an image of Google later. So this is an example of a warm-up/ramp-up. And these numbers are never exact. They're always a bit of a guide, but it's pretty much, as you can see at the very beginning, first couple of weeks, very, very low numbers. And then it can quickly scale right up. Now, these numbers can be completely irrelevant to people that don't even get the chance to send multiple times a week. It says daily. It is best to send daily, but if you happen to send weekly or monthly, warm up is still important, but you can't do it so well. What you should, if you don't send frequently, you should try and send frequently, and conversations can be had with as to how best to advise and switch over and adapt to it. But if you can't send actually every day, but you can, and you do send a few times a week, that's still okay. It's just the journey will take longer to get there. If you send monthly, warm-up's pretty much irrelevant because you don't send enough to keep your domain or IP warm. Because by the time you send it again, it's pretty much gone cold. So you should really try and send as frequently as possible. And that's why I wanted to come back to this whole warm-up and ramp-up discussion, because usually you think of this as like a thing for a brand new account, starting out, but it is also really important for ongoing as well, because ideally you should be maintaining a consistent email volume throughout the week, basically. So depending on the customer's largest mailing volume and frequency of send, warm-up and ramp-up might not directly apply to you. If you don't send more than 1,000 emails at a time, then again, it doesn't really matter as well, because your peak, the warm-up here, these numbers on the screen are to get to your peak volume. Like if your peak volume is only 80,000, then you only can warm up to that amount. Of course, you ignore the rest of it. If your peak volume is basically 1,000, per email, or only a few thousand really, then again, you don't really need to care about warm-up. Warm-ups are only really for reaching high numbers. But if you send infrequently, less than once a week, we strongly encourage you to try and not to do that. So the optimum frequency for emailing is, daily is best. Failing that as many times of the week as possible. But you should try and be consistent with your volume throughout the week and even month, and stick with the same days. You don't want to have spikes really. You want to have and avoid long periods of no sending. So if you do send at spike volumes, it's fine. There can be reasons for it, Black Friday or whatever times of year, things like that. But if there isn't actually a good reason for you to send that one email spiked to that massive volume at that one time, you should split it up and spread it out. You need, be consistent with your volume, help maintain domain health. Keep your list clean to lower the bounce rates. Avoid spam complaints. They're the worst things that people can do to email engagement. You need to send relevant content to your subscribers that want to read it, and be consistent with your design. You shouldn't use URL shorteners. A lot of providers out there don't really like those things. Obviously, avoid spammy subject lines and content. You should always include plain text version of your campaign along with the HTML, even if that plain text is a simple unsubscribe link, a simple brief summary, and a click here for the full content. Ideally, it's a full plain text email, but you could get away with it being as short as that. You should design for mobile too, because obviously mobile is massive, has been for many years now. And pay attention to image and text ratio. Consider in your email design that images usually aren't accepted at first. That's not strictly true for some of the big players out there, but there's still a lot of places where images won't be. And if that's the very first thing in your email, it's a big red X. There's nothing in the preview for people to judge your email on a glance. So why should they, for why they should download those images? You should have something at the top that isn't image based. But yeah, you should also avoid having too many images to text. It's just one of those metrics that can get flagged a bit. You need to make it very easy to unsubscribe. You want to encourage people to unsubscribe at all costs if they want to do that, as in, don't complain, unsubscribe instead, because then they're gone, rather than and that's them just unsubscribing. Of course, a complaint is a stronger bad signal, negative signal to send out to a provider. So yeah, nobody wants unsubscribes, but you want them to unsubscribe if they're going to do anything, just not complain. You shouldn't encourage a no reply on a sender address. You should send from real addresses that you can monitor. This is also important back to the domain setup being your company domain, because your company domain it already has mail accounts that go to your servers. Basically, you want to send emails from people or from maybe a generic address at your company domain, so that if anyone replies, it goes back to your company domain directly. And this is important for people maybe want to report abuse to you directly or just inquire into something. It's just a way that it's just it's a better thing for people to do as a best practice, pretty much. You want those replies, whether they're good or bad. You don't want them to have no option. Or sometimes the domain, if you don't actually use your business domain, and this is why we don't recommend it, if you use a different domain, those replies might not even come to you. They could get black hole sent to somewhere. With us, with one of a couple of our products, you can set up a forwarding, so we can capture the replies and forward them to you, but that just puts unnecessary steps in the way for things to go wrong. They should just come from your domain, and the replies should go back to you. And maybe if you can, segment your campaigns to give your subscribers what they want, rather than sending one big generic campaign with all this stuff in it that I might only care about 10% of it, versus a targeted email campaign, basically. So what can damage your sender score / reputation? Now, sender score specifically is there is actually a reputation metric called sender score. You could go and Google it. It's a metric that score from 0 to 100. Anything above 80 is good. Oh, great, I should say anything above 70s. Anything above 80 is good. Anything above 80 is good. 70s. No, oh my God. 80 is great. 70 is good. Sorry. You could go and look up your sender score if relevant, if you want to. It's usually an IP thing, but you can also enter your domains there. So although this says what's damaging your sender score, it's not directly referring to that sender score. It's also talking about just reputation and sender scores in general, because everyone can hold their own score for you, your reputation score. Google have their own score versus Outlook versus Yahoo versus A, B, C, X, Y, Z type thing. But what can damage it is who and how you're emailing, the content of your mail, frequency of your mail, your own domain. An IP could obviously damage your score, and engagement, not having engagement, basically. Some tips to be a better sender and improve reputation. So reputation usually comes from the quality of the data you upload and the engagement you get from the contacts in your campaign. So the better the quality, the greater the campaign will perform, and the higher your reputation will be. Make your data as high a quality as possible and send to the most relevant campaigns at the best time. Send emails that are consistent with what subscribers were told they'd receive at the point of signing up. Meet their expectations. And you can use segmentation to send subscribers content that speaks to them and their personal interests. Usually, ESPs will have functionality in products to create singular campaigns that have dynamic content to target multiple people in one, maybe to save you some time in setup and that. But yeah, just don't. It's all about sending emails to people that expect them, want them, and there's nothing in those emails that they feel is irrelevant to them. And why do they even get it? Make sure your frequency is consistent with what the subscriber is expecting. Like sometimes in signups, depending on what you do, you might tell the clients they're going to receive a monthly email. You should send a monthly email, or a weekly email, or a daily email. And if they get more than they think they should, that's when people can get annoyed. Yeah, so delivery problems are primarily driven by recipients complaining about the email. You should use recognizable and consistent from and reply names and addresses. So that's from is the obviously the email address the campaign comes from. So if you send from marketing at or Dave at or whatever it might be, you should be consistent with that. It should be relevant as well. It should make sense. Be consistent with the subject. Ensure subscribers recognize your mail. Test your content to ensure that it appears and comes across as you intend. Usually ESPs have tools for those things. And create an engagement strategy to make sure you're sending email to the subscribers that want your emails. It's quite generic, that, but just one of those things. Remove subscribers who are showing signs they don't want or aren't interested in what you're sending them. So this is usually fatigue. This is like, why are you sending to that data that hasn't engaged in all this time still? Now, the further back in time, the more dangerous the data can be as well, because data can be turned into spam traps if it's too old. Google announced quite recently that if you haven't done anything with your account in a 2-year period, and this starts from December this year, if you haven't done anything in your Gmail account for a 2-year period, like logged in basically, or even opened an email and replied, or there's a few signs, you can go look it up, they will shut down your account. They won't let this account email address be resubscribed. This isn't a new thing that mailbox providers can do. They can shut down old accounts, and then they can turn those accounts after another period of time into a spam trap. And then if those accounts still get emails, they go, well, someone's now sending to a miss or a poorly managed list that has old, really old data. They clearly don't care about their data. Why are they emailing this old data? They know that account basically has not engaged in years and years. So why is it still getting email? So the way around that is you really should try and send to people that are active and engaged. And as I said before, the older it gets, the more dangerous it gets. And it could be as harsh as going, yep, anyone older than 6 months, don't bother anymore. If they have showed no signs of doing anything, why are we sending it to them? 6 months might sound quite like that's going to knock out half my list. It is actually a good thing to do though, because if they've not done anything for that amount of time, then yeah, why are you bothering? You'll make the rest of your sends look brilliant in comparison, because that's all that data that's participating to your non-engagement rates. But yeah, 6 months, year, 2 years, things, strongly consider it if you aren't. Ensure you're sending relevant content to encourage engagement, obvious. Avoid sending to purchase lists, obvious. Pay attention to your campaign results and monitor your bounces. Don't just fire and forget. You really need to look at your data, look at the output. It should be obvious. Yep, more tips. Every time you send a test, you should make sure to download the images, click some links, and perhaps even reply, especially if you're sending tests into a provider account such as Google or Outlook or your Yahoo or whatever, because that sends signals upstream subtly that count towards positive engagement. Whereas obviously if you send test after test after test, although your individual sort of volume of those emails is very, very small, without putting up those positive signals, those numbers also can be counted against you for X emails to X destination where non-engagement didn't do anything. They just instantly deleted it. You look at it and go, yeah, that wasn't what I wanted. Delete, send another one. People can use that data. You shouldn't spike your email volume too quickly. Like if you're a frequent sender that sends your consistent volume, and you then acquire some new data, hopefully a good way, you shouldn't just throw it into the next campaign and spike that volume out massively. It's even more risky with the data containing more provider data out there. You should introduce it slowly. These numbers are, I think I made up 10%. It's not exact, but it's a good benchmark really. If you've got new data, you should add maybe 10% into your next campaign, and then another 10%, another 10%. It pretty much speaks back to that volume thing again. Warm up again isn't just at the beginning of the contract. It can be many months down the line when you just acquire new data. You might and you now need to reach a new volume. You should introduce it slowly. And there's loads of tools out there for checking your campaigns out. Some of them are product based, depending on the product you are using in the group, Spotler group, or third party. So here's some of the ones from the data mail products in the Spotler group. Some campaign testing. There's just example of a campaign test there where you've got some sent info, some spam test info, some forensics and AI information. You should just use these tools available to you, really. Make sure there's no alarm bells in any of them. ESPs typically have an inbox checker as well, so if you obviously looking to hyper care about your email design, working in multiple mobiles and browsers, then use your inbox checker, make sure it looks okay. Send Forensics, this is in the GatorMail product. You can get some information from it, such as content infrastructure and their own deliverability score for these things. Some of the products should have graphs. If you haven't, something you can create yourselves from just exporting CSVs maybe, but you should look at your graphs because they're the best thing to see trends. So just here's an example of some of the graphs in one of the products. Now, usually you look at them and go, yeah, that's fine. There's nothing there I don't care about, but it's spotting. If you see something in a specific campaign, really, like why did that campaign really under or overperform? If you then benchmark that out over a time frame, you can get some better insights into it. Here's an example narrowed in on just one of the opens by month. You can see in this graph, opens have gone up, and it's probably a correlation to sending less because you're now sending to more targeted. Because usually, as a standard metric is less email means better data, better stats. Because it's better data. In particular, in sends follow-ups, if you've got this or familiar with it, is where you would usually send a campaign and on let's call it a Monday, and then you could set up a follow-up 7 days later or whatever the hell you want to be to non-openers, which is never going to look good in the stats because those non-openers are likely to not open again. So now you've now just doubled up the volume and layered that again on top of your stats for an even lower open rate and engagement rate and click rate, etc. This was one example a few years ago now, but it was one of the graphs showed something like that green line. I'd like it to be red, but we couldn't make it red. The green line here has obviously gone up massively in May, and it's a bounce rate. Why did these bounces come in? If you look at that number, it's percentage. It jumped from what was usually somewhere above 5 to over 25, really, really high. But comparing that graph to another one, you could see it was a load of new data was added, loads of new contacts were created, and then bounced as a result, which means the data wasn't very good. And that data there wasn't introduced in a 10% rate, or potentially wasn't from a great source. So you just need to be careful with these things. But if you're looking at a graph and you're like, why are our stats going really, really bad? And you can maybe track it to the beginning from a certain point in time. And at that point in time, you find something that says, oh yeah, that's when we added a load of new data, but now things aren't so good. Well, that was the cause. You need to be careful with your data. It can hurt more than it can help. Google Postmaster Tools is another really, really great thing you can use. It's an account you can create, I mentioned earlier, directly with them. We can have the domain as well, but it's their own reporting for your email landing in Google. It provides information about your domain reputation, spam rates, authentication. Gmail classifies senders based on their history and sending behavior in 4 categories. They do bad, low, medium, and high. Here's a lovely, proud slide to show that the domain Spotler email is high, and this is a 60-day graph. I think it's 60, maybe 30, but whatever. It's you can go back to about 120 days in Google and check it out. So if you see it dip for any reason, you can maybe try and tie that back to a point in time and use that. IP reputation they show as well. So obviously you want high. Medium is also okay, even though it's not green, it's still good. You want to just not have low and bad, basically. But you can monitor the IP reputation. Now the good smart thing is with ESPs as well that you're using, you obviously are using their IP addresses when you send mail. It will be your domain, but you'll be using their infrastructure, which means it'll be using their sending IPs. With a Google account, you can very much monitor your ESP's IP reputation on your domain. So whether that's you're in a shared pool or on a dedicated IP, you would be able to see that. And if it looks bad or low, you could question with the ESP why you're on an IP that isn't too good. But we watch those things to make sure that isn't a question we would get asked. But you can have access to the data if you set up the account. Another tool out there is third-party mail tester. It's free again. It's basically you visit the site, you get an email address to send an email to, you wait a bit of time for it to be delivered, and then you can go and look at it, and it can just give you all kinds of information about your email, whether it's authenticated or formatting. It checks so many things about the email. It's just a really good thing to use. I wouldn't use it every single time. Like you might use it at the beginning to get a sort of feel for how you consistently perform there. But if you see a good score 9 out of 10 times, maybe the 10th time is or further all going to be fine. But if you can afford the time to do it each one, it's still worth it. The bottom line with email deliverability is, are you sending to your active and engaged contacts, opting in data, or are you only sending to cold? Is your email something people are expecting to receive? Would you open the email you're receiving? Do you think your email looks like any other spam email that you yourself would just delete or block or report as spam? Are you actually just effectively spamming people? And if any of the above makes you think, yeah, we might be, then why should your email be delivered to the inbox and engaged with? That is it. You've got to be sending email people want. It's a good data. Otherwise, why should providers let your email go in? So that actually concludes the end of my slides. I didn't really know how long that would take. I will check if there's any questions. I'm trying to waffle on a bit, but maybe let people go. So I've got one. Hi, will you be sharing this PowerPoint video recording so we can refer? Yep, it was recorded. It's automatic for this. I believe it's going to be shared out. I don't see why we would not. I'd like to cut out the bit where I fumbled about the good and great for sender score, but hey, that's the world we live in, human error. And then another one from Rodrigo. How can we know the sender reputation, domain and IP? So sender reputation is maintained annoyingly everywhere. There are common places for sender reputation. So you can Google sender score, and you can look up your sender reputation there by entering your domain. You can also use generic systems such as MX Toolbox or other. I can think of one. I think Roadrunner have one as well. You can basically just Google like what is my email IP reputation, sender reputation. You can find some links that just allow you to enter your domain or IP, and then just give you a massive list of is it listed, is it not type listed, or maybe a reputation there you can do. But then you've got things like Google hold their own reputation, but you can access that via the GPT. Outlook, Hotmail, Yahoo, they'll have their own reputations. You can't check those. You just have to look at your actual data, see how you're performing when you're delivering mail to them. I probably shouldn't leave you on a black screen. Let's see if I can go back. There we go. Something that looks very nice. That one. So yeah, you can't get, there isn't one place to check and get one answer or all the answers in one area. That just doesn't exist, unfortunately. But there are just good ones out there. Like if you have a bad sender reputation somewhere, then it might also be bad somewhere else. So when you see these things, then usually it means like, oh, okay, we'll check it out. If it's bad there, yeah, go and have a look at it. Hi, Holly. What's your thoughts on using emoji in subject lines? I think they're fine. I don't think they really care for metrics anymore. That's not strictly true everywhere, but I've not experienced in people's data and stuff anymore when there's might be a problem or something that looked like it could have been an emoji. I receive tons of emails that have emojis from all sources on a personal level, and I just glaze over them. I just don't care. I just see them, and they're like, yeah, that's part of the subject line, really. Another thing to just note separately is being the head of deliverability, or being in Spotler Group specifically, where we've got 7 ESPs, I kind of have access to 7 different ESPs companies worth of data. So, some of them send billions of emails a day, some of them sends only millions of emails a day. But we can see in that data, there's such a broad range of the data where if we can spot problems going on, or bad actors, customers maybe doing something they shouldn't, or just completely by accident. But it's a really good resource, really, because if you're a single ESP, you only have your own data. When our world opened up to the Spotler Group world, where there's 7 of them, I would now have access to all of those 7 ESPs worth of data, basically. And I'm like, what's going on with what normal looks like now is very consistent across them all for open rates and delivery rates into Gmail and Outlook and Hotmail and things like that. And you can really quite clearly in the world I live in tell when someone's having a bad time, and it's just really a great resource. And that's just a perk really of being in the Spotler Group, is that we can help you out. We see all these things, we monitor all this stuff. We use a third-party product called Postmastery. We feed all of our mail log data into that account, and we can just watch all the email delivery for all of our clients and really help them. Rodrigo, great. One more question. Is Spotler prepared to send transactional emails? Yeah, transactional emails, yes. Pretty much what we're doing in Spotler Group is we have, although I'm saying we've 7 ESPs, we're kind of coring on 3 of them. One of them is called FlowMailer, which is purely a transactional based company in the group. WebPower is the other big one, and then we've got MailPlus. They can all support transactional, but FlowMailer really specifically is tailored for transactional mail. So yeah, we can do transactional mail, marketing mail. The key selling point for FlowMailer, if you go and Google Spotler, is it's almost instantaneous delivery of an email. Like the second you click send, because it's transactional, it's one-to-one, that email is in the inbox in seconds. That's the key selling point. Do I have anything more to say? Template library. Hi, Holly. Yeah, we have a template library. It's obviously different for the various products, ESPs in the group. But yeah, there's template libraries to have access for pre-made designs in multiple of them. And we're also at the moment writing our sort of own, what do they call it? SPML, Spotler markup language it's called. It's a way that we can almost export a piece of content from any of the ESPs in the group into a common language that you can then bring into any of the ESPs into the group. And that will just obviously help with templating as well. Yeah, I hope this helped. There's a lot of waffling, a lot of deliverabilities, common sense, but also important and sometimes tricky as well. You just need to make sure that you're doing the best thing you can do to make people want your mail. You want that in positive engagement, because that's what ESPs use, providers use. When you're putting data into an ESP, you don't really want to put in any data you already know is invalid, because bounce rates are a metric people can use. Why import that list when you already know? Maybe you pull it from another provider or whatever. You don't bring it in with bad data. Basically, get rid of it. If you can get access to that status of data anyway. Sometimes there's third-party tools out there that can help you identify bad data anyway, in a sometimes not perfect sense. Is it possible to create email authentication linked to a CRM? Yeah, we have products in the group that you can link to a CRM, and you can create emails that are based on a automation nature. So maybe it's a website form fill, maybe it's joining a list in your CRM. You can have we've got things called integration and data sync, where data can be synchronized automatically between a CRM and the product. So if data appears in your CRM and it's part of the sync list, it could automatically send over to the ESP product. And then if you've got campaigns set up, mailings set up in the ESP that are watching that list, basically, an email could just fly out the door immediately for it. And sometimes that email could be a part of a workflow where they'll get this email, and then depending on what they do next, they can get one of the next ones, and you can create like a journey for them. There's multiple tiers of that functionality that exist in the group. It depends on the product you're using. But yeah, you can create quite a hands-off approach if you choose. I suppose that speaks a bit more to the transactional sort of emailing, where you can an event can trigger an email, and you can usually API these things to a ESP as well, where you can just you can have an event occur on your own world, and you can have that trigger something, then an API call hits the ESP to fire that contact in and get that email. You can almost create whatever you want. Out the box, most ESPs will just be like, upload this list, create the campaign, hit send. But yeah, you can get a lot more complicated if you want to. Just looking at any of my notes to see if I can fill some awkward silence. Not really. All right, I'm just going to call it here then. I'll wait another minute, but thanks everyone for being here, listening to me babble on. If you have any more questions, get them in quick. Follow up with us after if you like. But otherwise, thanks for your time. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.